Jeffrey's vacation. In the morning, I was the first one up as usual. I was really hungry for some odd reason, and I was thinking that Jeffrey was going to have a hard day, so I decided to surprise him with an oatmeal he had never gotten the day before. I got everything all cooked up and had just covered the pot when I heard little footsteps behind me. I started to speak and turned at the same time. "Good morning, Jeffrey. I made you some." Now I knew Jeffrey was bruised up from his fall, and also knew the bruises always looked worse on the second day. But at that stage of the game, I didn't know how much worse bruises looked on a kid with leukemia. When I turned around, I gasped, and my hand came to my mouth. Jeffrey had two worst black eyes I'd ever seen, and nose was swollen about twice his normal size. I saw my reaction and winced. "What's wrong, Stephen?" "How does your face feel, Jeffy?" "It feels thick." "Thick? And hot? Why?" "Well, a little swollen." "What do you mean? Do I look funny? What if the new doctor thinks I look stupid? I'm going to go look in the mirror." Before I could even think of trying to stop him, he ran to the foyer and looked in the hallway mirror. I ran over and he looked at me with horror in his eyes. "Stephen, I look like a raccoon." "You do not look like a raccoon." Actually, he looked like some deranged anteater, but I didn't figure that I would be a good thing would be the thing to tell him. "Yes, I do." "Oh no, what if I stay this way forever?" "You're not going to stay this way forever, Jeffy. People will get black eyes all the time. If they never get better, the streets would be crowded with raccoon people. Soon, raccoon people would find each other and breed." I was on a roll here. "The preschools would be filled with strange, ring-eyed children. Soon the raccoons would be taking over our streets, stealing from our garbage cans, leaving eerie trails of dinty Moore beef stew cans in their wake. Gangs of them would haunt the malls, buying up all the black and gray striped sportswear. Rivers would rise, the valleys would run with—" "Stephen, you're joking, right? What's for breakfast?" "Oatmeal." "Yay, oatmeal!" And just like that, Jeffrey was over his crisis, which was pretty amazing. If I have a single zit, I want to crawl into my bed and hide for 3 days with 3 days worth of food. This kid looks like he's lost a boxing match with a gorilla, and it takes him like 5 minutes and a bowl of hot cereal, to forget about it. While Jeffrey was eating, I snuck upstairs to warn the rents about Jeffrey's look. I figured my mom was going to have enough shocks to deal with, so I should spare her this one if I could. I worked, or at least the rents managed to hide their reactions from Jeffrey when they came downstairs. We all sat at the breakfast table, pretending to be normal and cheerful. But you know how when you watch the Brady Bunch, you think, "Oh, come on, nobody is this happy. What's wrong with you people? Who picks out your clothes?" Well, breakfast was sort of like that, only instead of clothing problem, we had unmentionable cancer problem. The goodbyes were pretty uneventful, and Jeffrey even managed to bug me, which was probably a good sign. On his way out the door, he turned to make fun of his brother. "You're going to school. You're going to school." If you if he had known what was coming up for his day, he wouldn't have been begging me. He would be begging me to smuggle him in my to school in my backpack. Once my mom and Jeffrey left, my dad and I just kind of slid around the house, getting ready to face the day, not quite ready to face each other. We got into the car without without word one being spoken, and on the actual ride, it was so quiet between us that I imagined I could hear the tire treads rubbing against the road. I couldn't wait to hop out there and get into school, but somehow we did pull up to the building. I didn't make any move to get out. My dad nearly looked at me and kind of stared through his right shoulder. After about a minute of this, we both mumbled at once, "Well, okay." That was the deepest conversation we would have all week. I got out and went to school. When I came around the corner toward homeroom, I saw Renee and forgot about everything else. She was wearing this shirt that was clingy and shiny and maybe a little bit see-through, with a skirt that just wasn't quite doing its whole job. I stopped and stared for far too long until Annette banged my arm. Check her out. That's no way to violate. There's no way to violate the dress. There's no way that doesn't violate the dress code. I hope she gets marched to the office. It's disgusting. Don't you think so, Stephen? Stephen. So at least Annette was talking to me again. When I tore my eyes away from Renee, the contrast was pretty strong. Annette was doing her 70s retro thing, I guess. She had this sweater that was pretty tough to describe. It looked like what you'd get if all your parents' favorite dinosaur rock bands died and left you their extra fabric. And then a little old blind lady sewed all the pieces together with this tasteful burnt orange thread. It made a statement, though. It truly did. Yeah, sure. Oh my God, I almost forgot. Steven, how's your brother? Did you get in trouble? I didn't get in trouble, and he's fine. I'm sorry I yelled at you on the bus. I'm sorry too, Stephen. I know how much you care about your brother, and you must have been worried. Me worried? Maybe. You might notice this would have been the perfect time to tell Annette the whole story, but for some reason I didn't want anyone at school to know. It turned out that once I decided not to tell Annette, at that moment it became almost impossible to tell anyone. So for the rest of the week, while I was walking around in a fog, I didn't say a word. I joked around with my friends, played the drums set in class, and acted even more lame than usual around Renee, but I didn't let anybody know what was going on with Jeffrey. It was weird. The longer I pretended everything was normal at school, the more I believed everything was normal. I started thinking over and over again, doctors are wrong all the time. You hear about these malpractice things every day where people get medicine that's not even theirs. I bet Jeffrey's down there in Philadelphia guzzling cheesesteaks and having a great time, getting waited on hand and foot by mom, while I'm up here eating hungry man dinners on the East Coast, and dad is pretending in some odd 13-year-old stranger who just moved in to keep the microwave warm while his real family is away. Meanwhile, that wasn't quite the way things were actually happening. I found out later that my dad was getting horrible phone calls from mom for about an hour each night, long after Jeffrey and I were both asleep. So, in a sense, my dad was shielding me from by not talking. I could have used some companionship that week, but maybe I wouldn't have believed anything about Jeffrey until I was really, no matter what, until I was ready, no matter what Dad said. The week went by in this half awake sort of way, for me at least. While I was staring at Renee in fifth period math and praying nobody would make her change her outfit, Jeffrey was getting strapped down on a gurney while Annette was smacking my arm yet again. The doctor was shoving a huge needle through Jeffrey's back into his hip, all the way into the bone. While I was laughing at some joke a teacher hadn't heard, Jeffrey was screaming as the needle sucked the bone marrow out of him. But I was just thinking about me and about how ridiculous it was that everyone except me was getting so freaked out over a stupid bloody nose. The only times all week that I truly felt all right were times when I was playing the drums. I have always been pretty serious about hitting the old practice pad at home, but now I was living in the conversation-free TV dinner zone, zombie zone. I basically had nothing to do. It was truly ridiculous. Within days after Jeffrey's fall, I got to the point where I was spending 25 minutes a night playing double stroke rolls on the surface of a dime without missing or even moving a coin. I know my drum teacher, Mr. Stoll, was going to be pretty impressed with my progress. Before this, he had assigned me maybe 2 pages in each of 3 different exercise books every week. But now I was doing 2 pages a night in each book, and also practicing my upcoming conga drum stardom. Mr. Watras lent me a really expensive bongos to use at home, along with a huge stack of ancient Latin records. He even called Mr. Stoll. They had played in bands together. Isn't it weird when grown-ups actually have actual lives, to tell him what I should be practicing on them? Fortunately, my dad has a Stone Age stereo in the basement, which with an actual turntable. So I was playing along with, at last, one whole Latin record each day. At least one whole Latin record each day. I know. You're probably thinking that my new Superman drum schedule must have been cutting into my homework. And in fact, you would be correct, except that I completely stopped doing homework the day Jeffrey got sick and didn't start again until I got busted by my teachers much later. I sometimes looked at homework assignments and occasionally even wrote a heading on a paper as if I was about to attempt this work, but somehow I wound up going to school empty-handed day after day. In class, too, I just started basically blanking out every period every day. You might also think that lots of my friends would notice if their pal, Steven, stopped doing schoolwork, started staring off into space 85% of the time, and suddenly avoided any mention of his family, but you'd be wrong there. I think every group of friends has a guy for each different function, like the sympathetic guy and the funny guy and the jock and the guy who gets picked on. I never had really thought about it before, but apparently to my friends, I had 2 roles, the funny guy and the drum guy. So as long as I carried a pair of sticks and kept humor coming, nobody was going to guess anything was up with me, except Annette. Pretty much every morning in homeroom, she would ask me what was wrong. The first few days, I would make up a joke and say nothing was the matter. After that, I got more impatient. And with her, every time she asked, I kept hoping that it was just a snappish thing. She would leave me alone. Meanwhile, she stuck me with something. She was my best friend, maybe my only true friend, but I wasn't seeing it. There is one way I was communicating with the outside world, and that was my English journal. Miss Palma had this rule: if you fold down on your page, it shows your journal is private. Well, my journal is starting to look like some kind of weird origami factory, with page after page folded on different angles and edges sticking out all over the place. Of course, Miss Palma had to know that I was doing something strange, because again and again I'd be writing 3 or 4 pages supposedly about these completely impersonal topics and then folding down all pages one by one. But either she really believed either she really believed that I was having a deep emotional reaction to questions like, should our schools have uniforms, or she was just giving me enough rope to hang myself. Here's the journal I wrote